Imagine the horror of the past. You stand in a dimly lit chamber in Rome, 12 BCE, the air thick with the sour reek of sweat and cheap olive oil lamps. A woman no older than 30 kneels on a cold stone floor, her wrists raw from iron manacles. Her name is Vipsania Agrippina, though the men who surround her call her something else, something vile whispered with leers. She is the concubine of a powerful man, not by choice but by force, her body a currency in the shadow of Rome's gleaming marble. Can you feel the weight of her despair, the suffocating dread as footsteps echo closer? This is no tale of grandeur. This is the story of a woman who would become the mother-in-law of Emperor Tiberius, her life a descent into unspeakable horror. The streets of Rome outside are alive with the clatter of carts and the shouts of vendors selling figs and fish sauce under the midday sun, August 17th, 12th BCE. But here, in this windowless room off the Via Sacra, time crawls. Vipsania's hair, once lustrous, clings to her face in matted strands. Her eyes, red from sleepless nights, fix on a crack in the wall as if it might open and swallow her whole. She was born to a minor patrician family, her father a man of modest means who dreamed of elevating his name. That dream led to her sale, not to a husband, but to a man named Lucius Domitius, a senator with a reputation for cruelty that even his peers whispered about in the baths. At 16, she was torn from her family, her screams ignored as she was dragged into a life where her body was no longer her own. If you're gripped by this story, please subscribe to our channel. It's a huge motivation for us to keep uncovering these hidden truths. And drop a comment below. Let us know where you're listening from. Are you in a quiet room, or maybe on a train, hearing Vipsania's story unfold? Lucius Domitius was no ordinary master. His villa, perched on the Palatine Hill, was a maze of opulence and terror. Frescoes of nymphs and satyrs adorned the walls, their painted smiles mocking the real suffering within. By day he played the role of a dignified senator, his toga pristine as he debated in the Curia. By night he descended into depravity, hosting banquets where Vipsania and others like her were paraded like spoils of war. The guests, men of power, laughed as they spilled wine on the mosaic floors, their hands groping without shame. Vipsania learned to swallow her cries, to stare past the faces of men like Gaius Marcellus, a young tribune who would later boast of his conquests in the Forum. Each night chipped away at her soul, leaving scars no one could see. What could she do? Escape was a fantasy. Runaways were branded with hot irons, their faces marked with the letter F for fugitiva. The streets of Rome were patrolled by vigils, men who cared little for a woman's pleas. Her only refuge was in her mind, where she clung to memories of her childhood, running through her father's small vineyard in Tusculum, the smell of ripe grapes under a golden sun. But even those memories faded under the weight of her reality. Lucius's demands grew darker. He forced her to drink bitter herbs, concoctions meant to prevent pregnancy, their acrid taste lingering in her throat. "No bastard will taint my house," he'd snarl, his breath hot with garum and wine. Can you imagine the terror of knowing your body is not yours, that even the possibility of life within you is a threat to be crushed? Yet Vipsania's suffering was not unique. Rome, for all its glory, was built on the backs of the broken. Concubines, slaves, and captives filled the city's underbelly, their lives erased from the annals of history. The law offered no protection. A concubine was property, her consent irrelevant. The Senate, dominated by men like Lucius, upheld the system, their debates on grain prices and military campaigns drowning out the silent screams of women like Vipsania. The Pax Romana, so celebrated in poetry, was a lie for those who lived in chains. How could a civilization so advanced in aqueducts and rhetoric normalize such horror? The question gnaws at you, as it must have gnawed at Vipsania, night after night. Her life took a turn in 10 BCE, when Lucius, bloated from years of excess, collapsed during a speech in the Senate. His death was swift, his body carried to his villa as mourners wailed for show. For Vipsania, it was a moment of fleeting hope, until she learned she was to be auctioned off. The market near the temple of Castor and Pollux was a chaos of misery, where humans were bartered like livestock. She stood on a wooden platform, her wrists still bruised as men bid with cold calculation. The winner was Agrippa, a general and confidant of Augustus, his face weathered from campaigns in Gaul. He was not cruel, not like Lucius, but his gaze held no warmth. To him, Vipsania was a prize, a symbol of his rising status. Her new life began, not as a free woman, but as a possession in a different cage. Agrippa's household was vast, sprawling across the Esquiline hill. The air here smelled of rosemary and baking bread, a cruel contrast to the despair within. Vipsania's role was clear. She was to serve Agrippa's desires and bear his children, her status just above that of a slave. The other women in the household, Livia, Agrippa's wife, and her maids, treated her with disdain, their whispers cutting like knives. "She's nothing but a whore," Livia hissed once, her voice carrying across the atrium. Vipsania bore it in silence, her hands trembling as she poured wine at dinners, where Agrippa entertained men like Tiberius, a young officer with haunted eyes. She noticed Tiberius watching her, not with lust but with something else. Pity, perhaps, or recognition of a shared captivity. Their paths would cross again, in ways neither could foresee. The nights were the worst. Agrippa's touch was mechanical, his breath heavy with Falernian wine. Vipsania lay still, her mind drifting to the Tiber River, its waters glittering under the moon. She imagined sinking into its depths, letting the current carry her away. But she endured, driven by a stubborn spark of defiance. She began to listen, to learn. Agrippa's careless talk after too much wine revealed secrets, plots against Augustus, rivalries among the elite. Vipsania stored these fragments, not knowing how they might save her. She also noticed the household's rhythms, the guard's laxity at dawn, the hidden door behind the kitchen. A plan formed, fragile but fierce. Could she dare to act? One night in 8 BCE, as Agrippa slept, Vipsania slipped from his bed. The house was quiet, save for the distant bark of a dog. Her bare feet padded across the mosaic floor, her heart pounding. She reached the kitchen, the smell of stale bread thick in the air. The hidden door was there, just as she'd seen. Her fingers brushed the latch, trembling. Freedom was so close, yet so impossibly far. What lay beyond? The city was a labyrinth, and she was a hunted thing. A sound behind her, a creak of wood, froze her blood. She turned, expecting Agrippa's rage. Instead, she saw a figure in the shadows, their face obscured. "You'll need more than courage," a voice whispered. Who was it? Friend or foe? Her breath caught, the world narrowing to that moment. The figure stepped into the dim light of a flickering lamp, revealing a face Vipsania knew too well. Scribonia, Agrippa's sister, her eyes sharp with calculation. It was October 3rd, 8 BCE, the air cool with the first breath of autumn. The kitchen smelled of ash and herbs, the fire in the hearth long dead. Scribonia's presence was a jolt. Vipsania had always avoided her, sensing the woman's cunning. "You think you can run?" Scribonia's voice was low, cutting. "They'll drag you back before sunrise, and Agrippa will make you wish you were dead." Vipsania's hand lingered on the latch, her pulse a drumbeat. She had no choice but to listen. Scribonia offered a deal, silence for service. She needed eyes in Agrippa's household, someone to report his plans. In return, she promised protection, not freedom, but a chance to survive. Vipsania's stomach churned. Betrayal was a dangerous game, but refusal meant death or worse. She nodded, her throat tight. Scribonia's smile was cold, like the glint of a dagger. "Start with Tiberius," she said. "He's been asking about you." The words landed like a blow. Tiberius, the brooding officer who'd watched her at dinners, was now a pawn in a larger scheme. Vipsania's life, already a prison, tightened its chains. Her days became a dance of deception. By day, she served Agrippa, her face a mask of compliance. She poured his wine, her hands steady despite the bile in her throat. By night, she listened, catching snatches of talk about Augustus's succession. Agrippa distrusted Tiberius, suspecting him of ambition. "He's a snake," Agrippa muttered once, his voice slurred, as Vipsania knelt to remove his sandals. She stored every word, her memory a weapon. Scribonia met her in secret, always at dawn, in the garden where the scent of lavender masked their whispers. "What did he say about Gaul?" Scribonia pressed, her nails digging into Vipsania's arm. Each meeting left Vipsania hollow, her soul eroding under the weight of her duplicity. Tiberius's presence grew harder to ignore. He visited Agrippa's villa often, his duties as a commander bringing him to Rome. On December 12, 7 BCE, a feast was held to celebrate Agrippa's triumph in Pannonia. The triclinium was heavy with the smell of roasted boar and myrrh, the laughter of guests drowning out the clink of Vipsania's chains as she served. Tiberius's eyes followed her, lingering too long. Later, as she cleared plates, he cornered her in a corridor. "You don't belong here," he said, his voice rough. His hand brushed her arm, not with desire, but with urgency. "I could help you." Vipsania pulled away, fear spiking. Was this a trap? Scribonia's orders echoed. Watch him, report him. But his gaze held something genuine, a crack in the armor of Rome's brutality. The household's tension thickened. Livia, Agrippa's wife, grew suspicious, her eyes narrowing whenever Vipsania passed. One night, January 22nd, 6th BCE, Livia caught her lingering near Agrippa's study, where he met with envoys from Parthia. "What are you plotting, slut?" Livia hissed, her fans snapping shut like a whip. Vipsania stammered an excuse, her heart racing. Livia's hatred was a living thing, fed by jealousy and fear of losing her status. Vipsania knew punishment was coming, perhaps a beating, perhaps worse. She redoubled her efforts for Scribonia, hoping obedience would shield her. But the web of lies tightened, each step pulling her deeper into danger. Agrippa's health faltered that spring. His coughs echoed through the villa, the smell of medicinal herbs filling the air. By March 15th, 6 BCE, he was bedridden, his skin sallow. Vipsania tended to him, her hands shaking as she mixed his tonics. His weakness changed nothing. His grip on her remained iron. One night, as she sponged his fevered brow, he grabbed her wrist. "You'll never leave me," he rasped, his eyes wild. The words were a curse binding her to a dying man's will. Rumors swirled. Poison, curses, divine wrath. Scribonia's visits grew frantic. "Who's been near him?" she demanded, her composure cracking. Vipsania said nothing, her silence a shield. But she saw the fear in Scribonia's eyes. Fear of exposure, of ruin. Tiberius's visits became bolder. On April 7, 6th BCE, he found Vipsania alone in the atrium, the moon casting shadows through the impluvium. "I know what you are to Scribonia," he said, his voice low. Vipsania's blood ran cold. How did he know? Had she been betrayed? Tiberius stepped closer, his breath warm in the chill night. "I don't care. I want you out of this." His words were a lifeline, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. She fled, her sandals slapping against the stone, his voice calling after her. The villa felt like a tomb, its walls closing in. Agrippa died on May 3rd, 6th BCE, his last breath rattling in a room heavy with incense. The household erupted in chaos. Mourners wailed, slaves scrambled. Livia's screams pierced the dawn. Vipsania stood frozen, her mind racing. Freedom seemed possible, but Rome's cruelty was endless. Scribonia appeared, her face a mask of grief, but her eyes gleamed. "You're mine now," she whispered, her hand clamping Vipsania's arm. The words were a death sentence. Vipsania's gaze drifted to the atrium, where Tiberius stood among the mourners, his face unreadable. Their eyes met, a silent question hanging between them. What would she do? The answer lay in the shadows, where survival demanded a price she could scarcely imagine.